Did the Warriors take control of the finals? Does Klay Thompson's injury change everything? What are the key adjustments both teams are making? The only question left is, say it with me, you win. Hey, sports fans, Coach Nick here, and welcome to the B-Ball Breakdown Podcast. I am pleased to bring on friend of the Breakdown, Nate Duncan of the Dunc'd On Podcast. Nate, how's it going, my man?
It's doing well, and you make me feel like I'm maybe not being enthusiastic enough in my intro myself. Maybe I need to step up my game a little bit.
I would recommend it. Try it. See what happens. You never know. But, Talking to you makes me all excited because we want to talk about Game 2. And I know that you have a very unique insight into a lot of the stuff that's going on, particularly in the play-by-play analysis. So I don't know. There's a lot of things to talk about. I'm going to make, I've already done, 2 videos on this. I got another 2 to do. Where would you want to jump off? And there's so many things to unpack here. What jumps in your mind right away?
Well, a lot of the attention was on Golden State's offense and DeMarcus Cousins playing well and giving them something, and then Nick Nurse going to the box and one for the last 5 minutes. But I felt that really was bearing the lead because Golden State's defense was so much better in Game 2. It was really a defensive victory. They had a lower offensive efficiency in Game 2 than they had in Game 1. I thought the offense looked better, but the numbers were the numbers. But I thought in particular Draymond Green looked so much better defensively. He didn't get chewed up one-on-one by Siakam. They put him into some other matchups as well so he could help a little bit more. And him getting back to the level he's been at defensively in these playoffs, I thought was the biggest key for Golden State's victory in Game 2.
Okay. Now, did you feel, because I need to go back and study the shots they did get, actually throughout the whole game, the Raptors, but were you not concerned at all over the amount of open threes and makeable threes they did get that they just missed?
You're talking about the Raptors?
Yes.
Yeah, to some extent I was. But I thought the biggest difference was the defense that Golden State played in the paint. They held them to a much lower percentage shooting in the paint, and it wasn't Pascal Siakam shooting 14 out of 17. And he hit some shots that were going to be unsustainable no matter what Golden State did with, above the break threes and the crazy hook shots and a couple of mid-rangers off the dribble. Those weren't going to be there for him every time. But I think he was only 5 of 14 around the basket. And so they just did a much better job of just being tougher, being in help position, defending with legal contact, but without fouling around the rim and making it more difficult for them. So, I think Toronto certainly, especially down the end, had some open threes that they could have made. And perhaps had they made those shots, then that loosens up the interior for Golden State. In the Game 1, Gasol and Siakam hit above the break threes pretty early. And then all of a sudden they find the going inside much easier. Those shots not going down as much. Those guys were combined 0 for 5 from 3 in Game 2. And so now the paint is a little bit more packed and they had more trouble finishing around there.
For sure. Well, I had Cody Toppert on today in the video to talk about the box and one. And it was kind of cool to hear, an NBA coach's perspective about that. And what did you make of that? I was kind of saying it's a high school defense. I don't think they even played it much in college. I think usually in high school when you have one guy who's so much better than everybody else, that's what you have to do. What did you make of that? And, we charted that. I think it was 9 possessions. The only shot they hit was the 3 at the very end, and they had 3 turnovers. So what did you make of that? And do you think we might even see it more?
I think it won't work when Klay Thompson is also in the game because he's just such a quick release, such a high release. If KD comes back, same thing. You can't just give him space on the perimeter the way they were for all the non-Steph guys. Quinn Cook is a decent shooter, but he doesn't inspire the same terror that Klay right. Klay is going to. He can be closed down a little bit more easily. He doesn't have as quick or as high of a release. They had him out there. I do think that the effectiveness of it was a little bit overblown in the sense that they got some good looks that didn't go down. They got some penetration where they just had ugly turnovers that, frankly, plays that should have been completed, or it took a great defensive play to stop them. They are a great defensive team. And also, when you consider that Golden State had a 12-point lead with 5 minutes to go, Steve Kerr generally tries to play it pretty conservative in those situations and run a lot of the time down. You'll see a lot of times when Golden State has a 15-point lead with 5 minutes left, they'll end up giving up a fair amount of that lead, probably not as much as they wanted to, or more than they wanted to in this game where Toronto was getting pretty close to being able to tie it. But you'll see them slow the pace down. They'll try not to give up threes. So a lot of the circumstance, I think, might change the way that works. Obviously, also Golden State will be ready for it going forward. I think there's some very simple actions that you can run against that zone that can get you some pretty good looks in particular, or you can obviously get any matchup that you want just by bringing the player you want over to that area of the zone. So I don't know that it's going to be some game changer. Maybe it's a look that they can go to when Steph Curry is out there at the end of the first and third quarters. But I think if Klay Thompson doesn't play in the next game, they'll be pretty effective defensively no matter what they do, unless they just are making too many mistakes. And that ultimately, to me, the elimination of Toronto's mistakes and miscommunications was the bigger thing that was accomplished by the zone than that, Golden State just had no idea what to do against it.
Yeah, I agree. I look like Golden State in their organic freeform offense still tried to. They had a nice pin down for Quinn Cook in the corner. He didn't shoot it, but Gasol did get out there okay. But they had some semblance of, okay, we're going to try and pin somebody down and get a corner shot. They did it once where Boogie went down the low post because he could easily just pin Kawhi Leonard behind him, and they didn't really do it, and that would have been another solution. I think that would have been death for them. And then they also got a nice pass from Draymond down to Boogie after he had screened. And just didn't want to, be ferocious and just kind of take Marcus Gasol down there. So, yeah, I would imagine Steve Kerr looked at that and said, we got really great shots. Even that Quinn Cook foul line jumper he took.
Yeah, that's a fine shot at that point in the game.
Yeah, and it just about went in. So, yeah, I have to imagine that they're not really worried. In fact, it's probably that same attitude they had after game one. It just didn't feel like they were that concerned. I think partly because, A, they knew that, Siakam was simply not going to shoot that way again. I think that was a big one, and that they were right there.
Yeah, and I think also, I do laud Nurse for going to that strategy, and I do think that zone may be underutilized. We saw the Miami Heat have a lot of effect with their zone this year during the regular season, because part of the reason I think that zone has been underutilized in the NBA is, well, if you're a good man-to-man defensive team, there's no reason to try to find another solution, right? Your man-to-man defense works pretty well, and you have good defenders already. If you're a bad man-to-man defensive team, that's probably because you have bad defenders. So most of the times when teams have experimented with zone, it's because they don't have good defenders to begin with. And so, hey, guess what? When you play zone with bad defenders, it looks bad. So yeah. It's interesting for me to see a team like Miami, which has a lot of length, and Toronto experiment more with the zone with actual good defenders and see what you can accomplish there. I do believe with the defensive 3 seconds and some of the great shooters that we have in the league, playing that over a sustained amount of time, maybe that doesn't work, but we never know. And to actually do it with a real defensive team gives you a better window into whether it actually could be a viable strategy in the long term for certain teams.
For sure. I mean, what we're missing here is they should be playing more like a 2-2-1 passive full court press. You're not going to wear the players out, but you make them take 7 seconds off before they get across half court. That should help, and then certainly they should try zone. I think the real benefit oftentimes is the possession after you switch back to man. You do it for a few, and then you go back to man. That tends to be a time when you might see a turnover or a really badly missed shot because the rhythm is completely disrupted, and then they go back to man. So I think there's a value there. And also, it is kudos and let's laud
Nick Nurse.
Nick Nurse for that. And here's the thing. He's coached at a lot of different levels. And I do feel like there are certain coaches in the NBA that have only coached in the NBA. And when you have to coach with, less talent and you have to get, coach yourself out of a paper bag, that's where you get really, interesting ideas that could actually benefit you at this level. We just don't have enough of those coaches who are willing and have the guts to do it. So again, it was really great and it was so effective anyway. And even though the shots were good for the most part for them, It was just kind of exciting to see. And, it's the chess match that I don't feel like we've had. I mean, I guess we had that with Kerr and Lou, sort of. Did we? I don't know if we ever felt it like this before. Have we?
Yeah, it's with the Cavs that it was always like, all right, are they going to switch or not ultimately? And then they would do it. And then were they going to do a good job? I mean, yeah, we haven't seen a ton in these finals. I think you have to go back to the 2015 finals where David Blatt really wanted to slow the game down. And he had the ultimate tool to do that with LeBron. They were playing with a ton of size. They'd play even Mozgov and Thompson together at times, really try to bludgeon them on the offensive glass and do a lot of holding off the ball as well with guys like Dellavedova. And then Kerr going to the death lineup, as we called it at that time, with Draymond Green at center and starting Iguodala instead of Bogut. That was probably the last series where you felt like a strategic change really made a big difference. And I think for Golden State, they have a reputation as a switching team, but they've really changed up their looks a ton on guys like Harden, Lillard, and now Kawhi as well. I mean, they do these things where, they'll look like they're going to switch, and then the guy tries to back out to half court to go at the guy who switched on, and then they'll come double team again. They have a lot of different looks and a lot of smart defenders to where they've been able to change up their coverages and avoid miscommunications throughout these playoffs.
And if you want to avoid the miscommunication of picking the wrong team during the finals, then pay attention to what Nate is saying. Watch my videos over on YouTube and think about how these two teams really match up. Once you've done that, you're ready to place some money down on who you think will win the finals. Head over to betonline.ag, the one place to get in on all the action, grab the odds, and allow the experts to do the heavy lifting for you. Sports, live betting, virtual casino, you name it. BetOnline.ag is B-Ball Breakdown's preferred sportsbook online. If you're feeling lucky and want to support the channel, go to clnsmedia.com/bball and use promo code CLNS50 for a 50% sign-up bonus. That's clnsmedia.com/bball for a 50% sign-up bonus. BetOnline.ag, your online sportsbook experts. Here's what's interesting. Speaking of this chess match, so in game one, they really got the ball out of Kawhi's hands with double teams, and even at the end, they just kind of ran at him when he was up on top trying to ISO. He didn't play very well, didn't score a lot of points, and the Raptors win. They pretty much flipped that. They were not blitzing him like we saw in game one, and then the Warriors win. I think that's interesting to me. Is there a direct correlation between those things?
I'm sorry, say that again. I just got distracted because the injury news on Looney and Klay Thompson just came down.
Oh, well, that was my next question. So why don't you give us that news? Break some news for us.
Yeah, well, so Kevon Looney is going to be out indefinitely. He suffered a fracture in his collarbone, so hard to imagine he'll be back. And then Klay Thompson has a hamstring strain. He's probably going to be questionable for Game 3. That's what the MRI showed for him. I got to say, for him, and I've been wrong on this before, but if you're at the point with your hamstring where you can't even run up and down the court, which is the point that he reached last night after a few possessions after he suffered the initial issue, it's hard for me to imagine him getting out there in Game 3 if you can't even run up and down the court 2 days earlier. Those hamstrings take a while to heal.
Well, wait, did they describe the exact nature, like tear, pull, strain? What did they say?
Just strain. That's all they said. So I'm not. We weren't ever going to get grade 1, grade 2. They didn't give us that with Durant either. So I think it was just, but
okay, because
but the fact that it shows up on the MRI, I think is not a great sign.
Yeah, I mean, Iguodala had something maybe not as severe with the hamstring, and they treated him for 2 days, and he looked fine. But yeah, I don't know. I kind of secretly would maybe wish he doesn't play because maybe we'll get some more boxing one. Although I think what happens here is if Klay is not going to play, then I think that sort of means that KD is going to probably really push to get back out there.
I think maybe that'd be the case had they lost Game 2. I think now they feel like, and they have a lot of confidence that I think they only feel like they need to win one out of these two. And yeah, that might put them in a Game 7 on the road. But I think they feel if KD and Klay are back by that point, if they can just get to a game 7, even if it's on the road, that they feel better about their chances. And then if KD tries to come back and suffers a re-injury, then maybe they're totally sunk in the series. So I would say they may just try to hope that they can grind it out defensively and get more from Cousins, and hope that home court can keep him in the game here, make it more of a defensive game, and that he would still wait the game for. I just don't think he's ready, frankly. I mean, given what the reports have been about his activity level, unless they're straight up lying to us about what he's doing. I mean, he hasn't participated in any team activities yet. And then you look too at his conditioning level. You know, if you're out there and you're not in condition, that's a recipe for re-injury as well.
For sure. Yeah, I agree. I mean, they don't sound like they're the most forthright about the nature of the injury to begin with, because it sounded like they tried to minimize it, and then, you know, he's been out longer than anybody would have thought based on what they'd said, and not, you know, it's impossible. We saw him walking around the back during the game, and so, you know, it's not as I still thought, you know, there might be something wrong with his Achilles, but the way he was moving in the hallway, it definitely is not his Achilles. I could tell that. That looks like it's just going to be the calf. So we'll see. But they've done some miracles with these guys. And, you know, Clay specifically has shown, I mean, he had a pretty bad knee problem in maybe last year, and he played on it.
Yeah, it was a high ankle sprain. From last year's finals. Is that what you're talking about? Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it's a high ankle. I mean, he wasn't very effective after that, but, you know, they didn't need him against Cleveland.
Yeah. But I can't really imagine if they're down KD and Clay. I mean, if Curry can win that game for them, then that would cement his status even further.
Well, and Looney as well. I mean, it's really, you know, they've got, and not only that, but the guys that they're reduced to now, McKinney and Jerebko and Cook. I mean, those are guys who have maybe one or two strengths, and, you know, are just not really complete players at this level in the NBA Finals compared to the guys that Toronto is going to be putting out there off of their bench.
I agree. Well, you know, what are your thoughts about Sean Livingston and sort of the corpse of Sean Livingston, and should just McKinney get another big portion of those minutes and let him not play as much?
Well, I mean, the problem is Sean can't really play more than 18 or 20 minutes. You know, he's played, I think, over 10 minutes for like 4 or 5 games in a row, which is the first time they've done it. And Kerr has basically said, hey, you know, he can't play more than 20 minutes at this point in his career. And he had an article with Anthony Slater a couple of months ago where he opened up about some of the health issues he's dealing with swelling in his knees. So I don't think they feel like they can play him more than 20 minutes. So it's got to be McKinney and Cook and Jerebko. I mean, after that, you're down to Jacob Evans. So you got to play probably all 3 of those guys, frankly, if Clay is going to be out.
Yeah, I mean, I'm actually concerned a lot more with like Livingston's defense. I feel like there's moments there where he's out of position and can't recover, and his jump shot has always been not pleasant to watch, but it was effective, and it just doesn't feel like he can make that anymore with the way the violent head snap back, and he hangs in the air for so long, and I know it's mid range, but still, so much airspace. So, well, let's get back to the Kawhi Leonard question, because how I posed it before was the Warriors had, you know, blitzed him, did everything they could to get it out of his hands, and he did not score very many points. He didn't shoot very much at all in Game 1, but yet the Raptors won. In Game 2, they didn't do that as much. He got his points a lot from the free throw line, and the Warriors win. So do you think there's a correlation between the way they were defending Kawhi and them winning the game?
Oh, that's tough to say. I think Kawhi only taking the 14 shots in Game 1, I think, was just more about how effective everyone else was, and that he didn't feel like he needed to do that. I do think that Toronto in particular, with the Warriors playing Cousins and Bogut a lot more, Toronto, I think the first 4 possessions of the game, either through a DHO or pick and roll, they went with Kawhi at Cousins 6 times, because there were a couple times where offensive rebounds or got knocked out of bounds or something. Mm-hmm. So they really made a concerted effort to go after him. And then Bogut in particular, I thought really it was a struggle for him. He was too slow in pick and roll defense, had some nice plays around the basket offensively. So I think because of the fact that they were with more conventional pick and roll defense, guys who weren't as mobile to get out there and do more trapping, that's maybe why they went to Kawhi a little bit more. And then when you consider how everyone else was struggling, I think he decides he needed to take over. You remember he took the 39 shots in that Game 7 against Philly when, you know, it seemed like some of the other guys were a little more reluctant there. So I'm not sure whether it's the chicken or the egg, whether it's Golden State saying, all right, we're going to let Kawhi shoot more, or the other stuff's not working, so they're going to go to Kawhi more that's causes that. I do think, though, that when you look at 3 assists and 5 turnovers, they did really limit Kawhi's playmaking. And while he was able to be efficient, he wasn't setting things up for other guys. They weren't taking advantage of any double teams that were occurring.
Yeah. I mean, it does feel like, at least after these 2 games, the notion of, let Kawhi do his thing and shut everybody else down seems to be the recipe versus the other way around when they would just decide we're going to take this guy out. And it worked for them in the previous series, especially against like the Clippers and then against the Blazers. So, but it kind of feels that way, I suppose. But again, there's also the regression to the mean certainly with Siakam. We knew he wasn't going to do his game 1 production like he did. But that brings us to, I think, Lowry, who just isn't playing very well, and his 6th foul could have almost been like, just get me out of here because
the fact that he acted like he didn't commit a foul in that play when like he clubbed him across the shoulder 2 feet away from where the ball was. I mean, that was just like ridiculous for him to act like he was stunned there when that was one of the dumber fouls that we've seen for a guy to foul out on.
I know, 90 feet from the basket. It's like the thing you learn in grade school. Well, speaking of that, what about the refereeing? A lot of people were really upset. I think I couldn't even tell by the end if it really benefited who was benefiting the most from the calls because it's so bad on both ends. I felt. What did you think?
Yeah, I mean, we do that live show, so I'm kind of reacting to the calls in real time. I generally focus less on the refereeing than a lot of people do. I didn't think that there were just so many awful calls, and I did think that it evened out relatively well. I mean, it was funny when people in the first quarter were saying, "Oh man, the Warriors are getting every call," and you look down and there's 6 fouls on the Warriors and 3 on Toronto. So I'm not sure. I mean, and that technical that got called on Steph Curry, I'm not sure whether that's like a point of emphasis or not. But to call a technical on someone for kind of just tossing the ball in the air at that point in the game by Scott Foster was, I thought, maybe inserting himself into the proceedings a little bit more than I would have preferred. So I don't know. I struggle there. I do think that overall a low foul game favors the Warriors a little bit more because guys like Draymond, Iguodala, those guys like to go for strips. Golden State will allow a fair amount of penetration and count on guys like Draymond to clean it up. Cousins is also kind of a handsy guy. He'll go for steals or blocks, but he's not, getting his chest in front of guys necessarily. So I think if the refs are allowing more contact as far as on strips and plays like that does benefit Golden State to some degree.
Interesting. Okay. I mean, certainly.
And they don't really draw fouls that much themselves. I know they've gotten to the line a little bit, and Curry has done a good job of that, but they generally have not been a big foul drawing team. So a lower foul game is better for them and also lets them get their transition game going a little more.
Fair enough. Yeah, I think what the worry tends to be is when they get Steph off the ball like they like to do, it lets them be really extra physical with him. They simply just don't call the fouls, and then as these series wear on, it's like anecdotally in my mind over these last 5 years, they just go more and more to him with the ball attacking, and then that's where he's protected because obviously they have to call cleaner or closer fouls when you're dribbling the ball.
Yeah, no, I think that makes sense, and especially if you're able to accentuate illegal contact that's happening on the ball. You can attempt a shot from like kind of a BS area when you wouldn't normally shoot it when you feel contact and draw attention to a foul, force the referee to make a decision as opposed to off the ball when they're just not going to be looking as closely. And Van Vliet has been a wonderful off-ball defender. So, but I think Steph has gotten more of his stuff I think off-ball, and that's part of why they went to the box and one to try and take that away to some degree. That'll be interesting to see. I mean, how much can Steph handle? I mean, obviously Draymond is very capable of doing that as well. I think one thing that I might consider doing if I were Golden State is having Steph work more as a screener on the ball.
Yeah.
And now when you don't have KD, that's a little harder to do. But I think Draymond is capable of at least getting into the lane and making a decision off of those type of actions as well, because they're not. That's one of the things they haven't done. I'm sure this has killed you as a coach. How many buckets they've given off on Steph Curry back screens in this series?
Yeah, no, that was a stretch. That 18-0 stretch, I think there were all layups on back cuts and beautiful passing by DeMarcus Cousins. Yeah, it was really. I mean, that's the next video I'm going to do tomorrow. Is focusing on that run, which actually started like in the second quarter, I think, when Steph heated up initially at the end of the second quarter and then kind of carried over into that 18-0 run. So yeah, I mean, let's talk about the overall series here and what your view is. I kind of felt like they'd split the first 4 games and then game 5 decides, the whole thing. And then I feel like maybe, the Warriors win that and they win in 6 in Oakland. What do you think?
Yeah, my pick before the series was Warriors in 7. This Thompson injury is extremely concerning for them, to be sure. That makes me want to go back towards the Raptors. We don't know how long KD is going to be able to play. We don't know when he's going to come back. We don't know how effective he's going to be. If you tell me that Klay Thompson isn't going to be able to return in this series, then I think you'd have to favor Toronto. But, the series will often see it shift when you get to the first game 3, the first series or the first game for the road team. And so we'll see. Maybe Golden State just has figured them out and they win the next 2 and the series is looking over. But I still am leaning towards Warriors in 7, just if they can get healthy enough and get KD back. I think they have the advantage. And to me, if Toronto wants to win the series, usually you say if the road team wants to win the series, they got to be up 3-1. To me, with KD's return, Toronto needs to win these next 2 games to be considered the favorites. Otherwise, I think I like Golden State, even if it is 2-2. After 4 with Toronto having the home court advantage.
Yeah, I could follow all that. I think that, the thing that's really sticking in my side is Lowry's play. They need him to play better. And I think even Gasol needs to play. I mean, there's enough players on the Raptors who aren't really playing even to their normal selves that it gives me some pause.
Well, we in one of the 2 games they did, really the only guy who played poorly in game 1 for them was Lowry. I do agree with you on Gasol, though. I think he is such a bellwether as far as, if he can score, hit, just 2 threes in a game, that opens up so much in addition to just giving him that extra 6 points or so. Feeling like you need to guard him out there, especially if he's going to be guarded by Cousins now, making him get out in the perimeter. I think he, to me, is the biggest guy I look at of are things going well for Toronto offensively or not?
Yeah, just look at the basket, man. That's all I want when he catches the ball at the high post. It drives me nuts sometimes. Well, listen, Nate, this is an awesome breakdown of Game 2, certainly as detailed as we're going to get, and I can't thank you enough for coming on. We got to do this a little bit more often.
Yeah, absolutely, Coach. Good to hear from you again, and looking forward to catching up in Vegas this year.
Oh, definitely. I'll see you there, and don't forget, sports fans, at B-Ball Breakdown, not a channel, we're a conversation. You in? Are you in, Nate?
Apparently, I just went on the show.